So how much are closing costs when buying a house in Ontario? If you're thinking about buying a home, you might be wondering exactly how much money are you going to have to bring to the table. Buyers always think about the down payment, but a lot of the time they forget about all of the additional charges that come with buying a house. And a lot of the times they're left short on closing day, which can be a really stressful and frustrating situation. So if you're thinking about buying a house, watch this video where I'm going to break down all of the additional closing costs so you know exactly how much money you're going to need. Closing costs in Ontario typically range between 2 to 4%. So that would be on, let's say a $700,000 purchase, anywhere from $14,000 to $28,000 in additional to your down payment. And a minimum down payment on a $700,000 house would be around $45,000. So let's break it down and go over these line by line. So the first one is land transfer tax. And this is one of the biggest ones. In Ontario, land transfer tax are a tiered percentage based off of the purchase price. So for example, a $700,000 home, your land transfer taxes would be $10,475. Now, if you were in Toronto, it actually would double because you have your provincial taxes and your city taxes. But as long as you're outside of Toronto, you're just dealing with provincial. So for example, Tri-City areas. So let me break down how the tiers for the land transfer tax work. So your first $55,000 of your purchase price is going to be at 0.5%. And then the next $55,000 to $250,000, that is going to be at 1%. Then from $250,000 to $400,000 is taxed at 1.5%. $400,000 plus all the way to $2 million is at a rate of 2%. And then anything remaining over that $2 million gets taxed at 2.5%. But to be honest, just use a calculator from RateHub or Google Online Land Transfer Tax Calculator, and that is probably your best way of being able to calculate it. Now, if you are a first-time home buyer, you actually get a credit, so you can apply for a rebate of up to $4,000, which will cover your first $368,000 of purchase. Next, you have your legal fees and disbursements. So this is for your lawyer to handle the transfer and registration of title, putting the mortgage on the property, all of those things, and all the nitty-gritty stuff with the transaction. Usually these fees will range between $1,500 to $2,000 for a purchase. You also have title insurance. So this is insurance that protects you against fraud or title defects. Sometimes, for example, if there were permits weren't properly dealt with when a renovation was done and you weren't unaware of it, it can even cover stuff like that. So this is a one-time fee. And typically for a first-time buyer, it's going to be anywhere from around $250 to $500. You also have home inspections. Again, this is optional, but it's always recommended, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. They can range anywhere from $400 to $600, $650 for an inspection, but a good inspector could save you thousands of dollars in unwanted repairs. You'll also have appraisal fee. So if you're putting a mortgage on the property, most lenders are going to require for that home to get appraised by an independent appraiser. So that usually costs between $300 to $500. Now, some lenders will actually cover that fee for you, but it's something to be aware of. Next is CMHC Insurance. So if you're buying a house and you're putting less than 20% down, then the lender is going to have to get mortgage default insurance on it. Now, the default insurance premium actually gets added to your mortgage. So it's not a cost on closing, but what you do have to pay is the HST portion of the premium. So depending on your purchase price, that could range anywhere from around $1,000 to $2,000. Now, if you're putting 20% or more down, then you don't need to get CMHC mortgage insurance and you won't have to worry about this expense. You also have adjustments on closing. So this is for stuff like prepaid property taxes and utilities. So you may have to credit the seller back for any bills that they've paid in advance. For example, if they paid for the full quarter of property taxes and you're closing partway through that quarter, the sellers will get reimbursed for the taxes that they have paid for, which you're going to be occupying the property. Adjustments are typically fairly minor, a few hundred, maybe $1,000. However, with rural properties, they can sometimes be a bit more substantial. For example, if you're buying a property that is on propane, what typically happens is before closing, the sellers will fill an entire propane tank and then you will pay for that full propane tank on closing. You also have those variable miscellaneous costs, such as your moving expenses, utility hookups, and then, any small renovations or purchases that you want to make for your new home. So those can vary dramatically depending on your specific situation, but you always want to build a budget for them. Now, if you're moving, that can range anywhere from as low as $1,000 up to $10,000 plus, depending on how much stuff you're moving and how far you're going. Utility hookups are usually relatively inexpensive, maybe a couple of $100s. And then obviously the things that you're going to buy or do to your new home, that can range dramatically. So how do you make sure that you're not caught off guard on closing? Well, first of all, have a rough budget between that 2 to 4% of your purchase price set aside for closing. So ask your lawyer for a quote ahead of time. You can also use any first-time homebuyers rebates to try and reduce your overall costs, and then utilize your agent and your agent's network of preferred vendors. They should be able to give you transparent pricing upfront. Closing costs can be a shock for a lot of buyers, but if you take the time to prepare and run a budget ahead of time, they don't have to be. One of the best things that you can do is, if you're a first-time buyer or new to the purchasing process, is sit down with your agent and have them come up with a customized budget for you.